Hello everybody, and good afternoon, and welcome to the Museum of Science. This is the first in our winter-spring Let's Talk About Food programs. And we're really excited to be able to co-present with Slow Foods Boston this advanced screening of the film Forks Over Knives. The film examines the connection between a plant-based diet and significantly improved health. And I think it's going to have all of us talking for a long time. It will open in Boston theaters in May, and we are just so fortunate to have the opportunity for a sneak peek sponsored by Whole Foods Markets. And now I'd like to introduce the Whole Foods Market Healthy Eating Associate Coordinator, Mary Latouf.
Thanks. I just want to start off by saying that Whole Foods Market is very proud to host this afternoon's advanced screening of Forks Over Knives, which is a truly compelling film. Whole Foods Market is deeply committed to the health and wellness of our team members, customers, and communities. In 2010, we introduced our Health Starts Here program. You see information about the program flashing on the screen here. But Health Starts Here is a simple, mindful approach to healthy eating that's based on 4 pillars: whole food, nutrient dense, plant strong, and healthy fats. We have a passionate healthy eating specialist in every one of our stores here in the North Atlantic region. They're here to help guide you on your journey to eating well. Our specialists do everything from hosting in-store classes, cooking demonstrations, and store tours. They can show you how small changes in eating habits, like incorporating a salad every day, can lead to big improvements in overall health. No matter what your lifestyle is, we're here to help take the mystery out of healthy cooking. We hope that you connect with our healthy eating specialists at your nearest Whole Foods Market. Now, I mentioned Plant Strong as being one of our 4 pillars of healthy eating. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the man who actually coined the term, Rip Esselstyn, Whole Foods Market healthy eating partner and author of the Engine 2 Diet.
Thank you. How many people have had a fruit or vegetable today? Okay, you can all stay. How many of you have had your kale today? All right, for those of you that don't know, kale is the new beef. All right, let's get it straight. It's the new beef going forward. It's angry lettuce. It's lettuce with an attitude. It rocks. I want you to know that this is my 16th advanced screening of Forks Over Knives, and the response has been phenomenal. Every venue has been sold out, and we've had some cities that have had waiting lists up to 1,000 people trying to get in. So you guys are very lucky and fortunate to be one of the lucky few to see this. Brian Wendell, who's the executive producer for Forks Over Knives, did a trial run in Portland, Oregon about a month and a half ago. And it was in a couple theaters, and it was going to be just for 1 week. And in 3 days, they did what they wanted to do in 1 week. And all the theaters were so ecstatic with how well it was doing that they kept it for 4 weeks. And because of the success they had in Portland, Landmark Theaters, Regal, and AMC's are going to take it nationwide starting in early May. So, yeah, so the awareness will be getting out there. It's fantastic. How many of you were privy to the fact that President Clinton told Wolf Blitzer that he was going plant-based? Everybody in this room see that? Well, anyway, that's quite a little zeitgeist in and of itself, that the former president on CNN said that he was going plant-based, and he cited my father, Dean Ornish, and Cohen Campbell in the China study in that interview. So pretty spectacular stuff. Winston Churchill has a quote that I love. I love a lot of his quotes, but this one: healthy citizens are the greatest asset any country can have. And I would submit to you that right now, one of our country's greatest liabilities is our health. And the answer is not another pill, and it's not another procedure. I think we all know that. The answer is what's at the end of our forks. And so without any more time, forks over knives.
Well, that was a pretty striking and lots to think about. So to continue the conversation right now and to answer some of your questions, we've assembled a terrific panel of guests. From the medical world, we have Dr. David Eisenberg, who is one of the gurus of alternative, complementary, and integrative medicine. He is also director of the Healthy Kitchens, Healthy Lives Conference, which is a Harvard Medical School continuing education conference co-sponsored by the Culinary Institute of America. From the nutrition point of view, we have Tara Mardigan, who is a licensed dietitian and nutritionist, and she works with people on both ends of the health spectrum, cancer patients at Dana-Farber Institute and the Boston Red Sox, athletes. To moderate our discussion, along with Rip joining the panel, is Louisa Kasdan, who is a journalist and food writer. She is also one of the driving forces behind the museum's Let's Talk About Food initiative. So please join me in welcoming these guests to the stage.
I have this scary feeling I have screwed up my microphone. Have I? Yes. I screwed it up, right? Okay. Talk amongst yourselves for a second. I don't think that'll work. This will hurt a little bit, and maybe I can ask for help while I address a question to somebody else. First of all, I apologize, the light is with me. Just so we know, and so we can properly frame the conversation, how many of all of you here are sort of already on something that I'm going to call the plant-based whole foods continuum? Well, that's pretty close to unanimous. Not entirely unanimous, but it's pretty close to unanimous. So I think that we're going to spend more time on information and probably less time on making the argument. Fair enough? Also, I want to point out that this is a wonderful panel. It is a panel that has a medical expert with deep experience in comparing different kinds of medical systems, a top-flight nutritionist who's dealing with all sorts of people who are sick and people who are very fit, and a practitioner who has, among other things, written a fabulous book, which I've had the chance to read. Rip. Have any of you read the Engine 2 Diet? Oh, I see some people holding it up. I think there's going to be a book signing after this, so I'm excited about that as well. So as we move forward, let me start with Rip, just because I did read the book. And one of the things in the book that was so charming and interesting to me is how he went from being a kind of a college athlete, sitting at the table with cheeseburgers and chowing down, to essentially the poster boy in many ways, quite honestly, for his father's program.
So you want to know how I got to where I am? Yeah, you know, I went to the University of Texas in 1982, and I was on the University of Texas training table. I went there on a swimming scholarship, and I ate on the training table with the football team, the basketball team, the baseball team, and we had steaks at every meal if we wanted. We had cheese pizza, we had mashed potatoes with gravy, all the ice cream we could eat, apple pies. It was endless. And I basically grew up in a household as well that we ate whatever we want. The two things we never had in our house growing up, we never had white bread and we never had soda pop. But other than those two things, we had everything imaginable. And so everything changed, though, back in 1984 when my father really started his research to show that you could not only halt, but you could also reverse heart disease by eating a low-fat, plant-based diet. And so I would get whiffs of what my father was doing when I would come home for Thanksgiving, Christmas, when I was at the University of Texas. And then when I graduated from the University of Texas, I immediately transitioned into a career as a professional triathlete, and it just so happened that the top triathlete in the world at that time was Dave Scott, 6-time winner of the famed Hawaii Ironman triathlon, and he was my hero, and he was a hardcore vegetarian. So in 1987, for performance reasons because of Dave, and for health reasons because of my father's research, I started eating this way and have not looked back since.
Oh, I think you can keep that. Can you hear me now? I have to tell you that I have many people in my life who can never hear me, with a microphone or not. Let me turn to Tara. Tara, you are leaving from this meeting to get on a plane and go to spring training with the Red Sox.
Yes. I need to be out of here at 5:30.
Okay. I'm bringing her up fast. So talk to us a little bit about this is this the diet? The diet that was described in the, and as I said, I'm making an assumption, and people are allowed to get up and speak and disagree with me afterwards, that we all believe that adding more plants and less meat, less white bread, less all sorts of things that your family sort of dial back on into our diet. So for your athletes, is the diet here, which does not have oil, which does not have meat, which does not have dairy products, is that where you're taking them? Is that the trajectory, or is that sort of one of the avenues?
I'd like to focus on the phrase that you coined, Rip, which is plant strong. So I think that that's really where we head. Just getting the young players or even the more veteran players to eat more plant-based foods is sometimes a challenge. So although I would love for Rip to come to the clubhouse and show them that it's possible, I mean, I think there is we have to start somewhere and move towards plant-based. That said, we do have animal-based proteins in the clubhouse. We do have olive oil. We have other not engine to, say specific diet, but
It does look pretty good, you have to admit.
there is I do think there's something to be said for that. Men associate baseball players, professional baseball players, think they have to eat meat, or maybe not even meat, but protein. I mean, so many guys last year at spring training asked me about protein shakes. They're like, do we have enough? Do we have enough protein shakes here? And I remember thinking, like, I'd look at the protein shakes that we have, and it's, what Major League Baseball approves that we can bring into the clubhouse, and they're filled with I mean, protein is in there somewhere, but the ingredient list is, you can't say it in 5 minutes or less. And so when I show the guys that label, I say, do you know what any of this stuff is? Because I'm not even sure what half of it is, and I can't say it. And so then we start a discussion on how they can get protein from Whole Foods and how it's quite easy. And my gosh, I didn't know if I just made a peanut butter and honey sandwich, I'm actually feeling a lot better than taking in some of these things that I just think go with the culture of what we think we need to do, depending on if it's a cancer patient or an athlete. So it's a learning curve, and I think you can't lecture people. You have to be visual, and you have to be fun, and you have to say, I'll give you one example, and it's Big Poppy last year came up to me with a container of yogurt, and he punched me in the arm, and he said, hey, are you happy? Look at me, I'm making changes. And I said, yeah, let's take a look at that yogurt. And when we, this is where I was the dietitian, but I said, go grab a can of Coca-Cola, which we don't have anymore, thank you. But, he sat down with the can of Coca-Cola and then the yogurt, and the sugar was exactly the same. So there's a learning opportunity, over and over and over again. And what you don't want to do is have people throw their hands up in the air and say, well, the yogurt was supposed to be good, now it's not good. No, how can we make it better? Is there a way to make it better? Let's try plain yogurt. I mean, so it's, I think, a learning opportunity throughout, and people are on a different end of the spectrum. Some people are very plant-based, and other people need to know, that, my gosh, it's okay to include these foods, and I'm going to feel pretty good.
I just love the idea of Big Papi coming over and just kind of giving you a little noogie in the
He
arm.
really did.
I am hopeless, I think, with this. I think I'm just going to hold it. David, you as a physician trained in internal medicine, you were one of the first physicians, first medical students ever sent to China. So you first went to China in the mid-'80s?
Late 70s.
Late 70s. And I do recall in a previous conversation with you that you spent an entire year learning how to be a crackerjack Chinese chef. You've also since then spent a lot of time looking at comparative medical systems and nutritional systems around the world. What does this movie make you think about the impact of diet on health and the ability to use diet to actually reverse some of the significant health challenges, lifestyle aggravated health challenges in America?
Rip, first of all, I want to thank you for bringing it to our attention and for serving as a human role model of what is possible. And I really bow to you and to your dad, who's a pioneer, and to Dr. Cohen Campbell. I think this movie is going to create a lot of controversy in the United States. A lot of controversy. And I don't want to shy away from it. I want to mention some of the things that are controversial, for which there will be, in my view, some rightful pushback, but other areas where I think it's dead on, spot on, as Cohen Campbell would say. A little bit of full disclosure. I'm a physician. I went to Harvard College, Harvard Medical School, Harvard Residency is what they call preparation H around here. But I actually grew up in a bakery in Brooklyn. I mean, my father was a baker. His father was a baker from Poland. And his father was a baker, and they were great cooks. And I learned to cook before I could write or ride a bicycle. So I grew up loving food and people who made food and people who loved to share great food. So I grew up with a real sense of the pleasure, as it was described, and the power, the primitive, enormously wonderful power of food and love and family. Now, the sad truth is the Jewish diet made the standard American diet, the sad diet, standard American diet, look like the Engine 2 diet, because you know, it was mainly a lot of fatty foods and heavy foods. And very sadly, my father died when he was 39 of a heart attack, and I was 10. So that propelled me towards a career in medicine, probably subconsciously, with many years of psychotherapy behind me, to figure out how I could help other people from this kind of tragedy. So I, for many, many years, thought, isn't it about time that the medical community worked with the culinary food community, and I would say increasingly the agricultural community and the environmental community, to work on this together. And what I will say about the film that to me is not so controversial is that if we ate predominantly plants and a lot less saturated fat, which is mainly animal fat, there's no controversy that it would reduce cardiovascular disease, heart disease, stroke, some advanced kidney disease, which is often related to hypertension, and absolutely make a dent in diabetes. Remember that statistic that they announced? 1 in 3 children born after 2000 at this rate will be diabetic. Think about that. And our children are now expected to live several years less than their parents. So there's no controversy about this kind of a diet reducing cardiovascular risk. I will say, just as an aside, there is tremendous controversy as to whether protein in and of itself is the bad actor, or whether it has more to do with fat and other issues for cancer. That's where I think there will be a lot of controversy. I am not one of the people in the camp that says all protein causes a higher risk of cancer. I don't buy into that. I'm not giving up my fish. I eat egg whites. I'm not sure that that is the solution. But having said that, with that controversy put in the parking lot, if we got people to eat less refined sugars, less white bread, white flour, white pasta, more whole grains, and much more vegetables, and much less saturated fat, which is predominantly from animal fat, there's no question we'd be healthier, we'd weigh less, we'd have better glucose control. People like that wonderful woman who was on the brink of becoming diabetic could be brought back. People with chronic disease could lose weight, feel better. I will also mention that from the movie, it gets a little, I don't want to say unclear, but did you see how much exercise these people were doing? Let's look at both, and you're a great example, Rip. I mean, you have combined really an ideal diet, or one of many possible ideal diets, with a lot of physical exercise. And that's part of the equation too. But I think there's no question that this will stir in America and the government and perhaps the health professional community a renewed debate as to what kind of health delivery system do we want for our children and our grandchildren. And this is where my favorite topic comes in. You know, I created this combination between the Culinary Institute, the food community, people who make wonderful food, which can be healthy, delicious, nutritious, accessible, affordable, and fabulous. They're not mutually exclusive. But if you take the food community and bring them with the medical community, you know, maybe we should be teaching people how to cook as well as how to eat differently. How many people here consider themselves great cooks? Not that many. This, to me, is the elephant in the room. I don't know, it doesn't come up much in the film, but I'm watching this doctor in California who I'd love to meet and saying, how do you show them how to cook? You know, my dream for 20, 30 years now has been to be teaching kitchens in hospitals and teaching kitchens in colleges and ultimately teaching kitchens in K through 12 schools, because we've had 3 generations or 2 generations without anybody teaching how to cook. So if you take the combination of not knowing which foods are better for you, not knowing how to prepare healthy foods, and increasingly eating out all the time, and doing less and less exercise, you can see why you've got the perfect storm. I hope this film brings up all of these issues, and I salute you for it, so I'll stop there.
But that brings up a really interesting question to me. And please let me know if you can't hear me. You can hear me, okay. How do you get people to change? I mean, Rip, I see the pictures of you there in the fire station. You're a pretty powerful motivator. I can see that. If I were lucky enough to be in the fire station with you, or you know, any kind of context, I can imagine that that would be a motivator. But Tara, in your context, I mean, I can imagine that you have some experience with athletes and they start to see the difference in their performance. But how do you get the average person who is not really so motivated to actually make a significant change in their lifestyle? Question to both of you.
Well, for my book, I wanted to have a pilot study, and I wanted to have anywhere between 50 and 60 people, and I was told by a lot of people, you'll never get 50 to 60 guinea pigs to eat this way. You know, my father got, 18, I believe, at the end, but these were all people, obviously, that had their backs up against the wall with heart disease. And I was just looking for athletes, you know, housewives, business people, grandparents, you name it. And at the end of 2.5 weeks, I had to shut it down because I got so many people that wanted to take part in this pilot study for the book, where you ate plant-based for 6 weeks. So I think you'd be surprised. And you know, the book's been out now for almost 2 years, and I get at least dozens of emails every day from people, from firefighters to grandparents, saying the NSHU diet has absolutely changed everything about my life, the way I feel, my health, my cholesterol, my diabetes. So you'd be surprised how many people are out there that are looking for something and realize that the current paradigm is not where it's at.
How does that stack up with your experience?
Yeah, I agree. I think people are somewhat fed up. In my private practice, I see a lot of people who are trying to lose weight or prevent diabetes or take care of diabetes. And I wrote some notes down here that I think are messages that I would like to get across. And one is coming from motivational interviewing, which is a whole field now, but invite ambivalence into the room or into the table or into the kitchen. If somebody's got a barrier, like, well, I don't like broccoli. So when I'm meeting with somebody, I'll talk to them a little bit. Why not? Have you had it? Sometimes people say no. I say, well, then you're not allowed to dislike something you haven't ever had before. But if there's barriers, hear about them. Well, it's too expensive. Okay, let's try to figure out a way to make it more affordable. Let's go with frozen fruits and vegetables. So whatever challenge is brought forth, you have to try to help somebody break that challenge down. Now, it may be in the doctor's office or, at the fire station, wherever that challenge may be. But it also could be within the family. You have to partner and motivate each other, but understanding where the challenges really are, and then finding the right resources to move through those challenges. So I like challenges. I like messy. Tell me that something's not going to work because I'm going to give you a homework assignment to show you that it will work. So. Or it might work.
I think you could help me.
Okay.
Brooke, let me ask you, the protein issue is going to come up again and again. And I saw this film before, a week or so ago when I previewed it, and I watched it with a little bit more acuity today. But how committed and how important do you think the idea of no animal protein is to the success or to the extraordinary success not only of your book, but of the people who've been on the diet?
Well, I think for most people, they like it when things, or it's easier when things are black and white for them. And the problem is when I give people a lot of wiggle room because I want you to be plant strong, not necessarily plant perfect. But that's also, I also don't use the term vegetarian, vegan, because, there's cheating vegans, and there's lacto-ovo vegetarians, and there's reformed vegetarians, and you have everything under the sun. So plant strong is just a very inclusive term. But that being said, and I'll just speak for myself, it's much easier when it's black and white and there's no middle ground. Because for a lot of people out there, it's just a slippery slope. And you're having fish one day, chicken the next day, olive oil, lean buffalo, and there's always a way to rationalize your way into that animal protein. And plant-based proteins are the friendliest on the body, and they're complete, right? They're complete. Animal proteins may be a little, let's just say, more complete, but the analogy I'll give you is, let's say we want to cook something in the oven, and so if it was animal proteins are the equivalent of putting something in the oven at 750 degrees, plant-based at 375, 400. You're going to cook both the items, just one's just a little different temperature. Another analogy is if we're doing animal proteins, I'm going to give you a $100 bill, but you can't make change very easily. A lot of restaurants, they're not going to, you can't use it. Whereas with plant-based proteins, you got 1s and 5s and 10s and 20s. You get all your proteins you need. And the human body, really, we can't, there's 3 macronutrients out there: fat, protein, carbohydrate. The one macronutrient we cannot store is protein. And so really what we do with excessive protein in the diet is we either excrete it or we store it as fat. So we have this country that's gaga on getting all this animal protein, or protein in general, and there's no need. There's no such thing as protein deficiency unless you're not getting in enough calories.
Well, that makes sense to me. We are going to open this up in a few minutes for you to ask questions. And I have 1 or 2 more questions that I just quickly want to address. And I want to just, David, if you were going to ask Tara one question, having seen this movie, what would that question be?
Um, I don't really have questions for Tara. I mean, I'd like to see if she shares with me some skepticism about the relationship between proteins and cancer, but that was the most controversial issue. I think she and I, we talked a little bit before the panel. I think she shares with me the sense that a predominantly plant-based and a plant-strong diet is infinitely better than what we've got. I think she shares with me the notion that if we get people to exercise more, have more whole grains, all these things would cut down most of these diseases. I don't really have a particular question for Tara, but I'll let her speak. Yeah.
But I have a question to ask you in response to that. One of the things that was so arresting in this movie, in this film, were the rapidity of changes. And I'd like you all to just talk about that, because that really is stunning to me, the idea that in 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 12 weeks, that such remarkable changes in all sorts of medical chemistries, all sorts of things that we track would occur. Let's talk about that. Is that possible?
Yeah. First, I want to say before I forget, thank you for the movie. And what I like about it is that it's going to get people talking. And whenever we get people having a dialogue about food, whether they're eating meat or fish or whatever they're eating, I think that's the most important thing that we can do, is just have more of a conversation around food. I'm a big fan of non-judgmental too, and I like that you said, look, not everybody's going to be strictly one way or the other. It's not vegan per se, it's plant strong. So people get the message that these are things that we need to incorporate, no matter where you are on the spectrum. So I think that that's very powerful. And to your question, I would say, my website is One Bite Better for a reason, because I really think people need to just try to do a little bit of a change at a time. And once you do that, and you can do it over and over and over again, you empower yourself to, okay, I can do this.
Can I just answer the physiology question before you jump in? So if I'm an internist and I'm watching somebody's blood sugar or cholesterol level, somebody who is pre-diabetic and has some elevation of their blood sugar, or somebody with frank type 2 diabetes, if they shift from simple carbohydrates, the whites, white flour, white pasta, white bread, etc., white rice, to brown rice, farro, quinoa, whole grains, whole wheat, their blood sugar control will change dramatically in hours.
In hours?
Hours.
Did we all hear in
and
hours?
then within days, it's just different, because your blood sugar changes meal to meal and hour to hour. With regards to cholesterol, I'm old enough that I actually remember the pre-statin era. shows how old I am. Where I used to, as a primary care internist, this is in the early 80s, take people who had marginal or elevated cholesterols and ask them to go on the Engine 2 diet for a month. And within 2 weeks, not a month, within 2 weeks, those people who were going to change dropped dramatically. We saw this example of this guy who changed over 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks. It can shift in 2 or 3 weeks. But here's the point. Many people dropped dramatically. Some people dropped modestly, and some people didn't budge. Those people ended up ultimately needing the statins. So I just want to make a point here that, extreme generalizations are extreme generalizations, so there are changes. Anyway, the physiology changes abruptly. Our bodies are wired, I think, to eat this kind of a diet and be maximally operative. But this brings up 2 more points that I know Tara and I shared before that we wanted to share with the audience. There are 2 ways, at least 2, to think about improving your overall health and reducing your cardiovascular risk. One is helping America get closer to its lean body weight instead of being 75% overweight or obese. If more people were closer to their ideal body weight, that's one goal, probably the strongest goal. The second is, even if people don't lose significant weight, their choice of which carbohydrates, which fats, and which proteins they eat will change their physiology and reduce their risk of these diseases. Keep that in mind. So your choice of which foods you eat day by day, hour by hour, changes your physical function, the C-reactive protein, the inflammatory markers, your blood sugar control, the way your white blood cells work. All these things are changed by the foods you choose, even if your weight doesn't budge. So I just wanted to throw those ideas out.
If I could just, so what's your website? One Bite at a Time?
One bite better.
One bite. Okay.
Yep.
One
But
bite
one
better.
one bite at a time is good too.
But so I would say that, I mean, anything's great, but I am not necessarily a fan of incremental improvement. I want transformative improvement. And so the Engine 2, it's like you decide which path. I think it's important that people have an option. So I give people two options: Fire Cadet or Firefighter. And both places get you to the same place, where you're all 100% plant-based at the end of the 4 weeks. Because when you eliminate all these things, you're left just really, for the most part, eating whole grains, fruits, vegetables, beans, some nuts and some seeds, no extracted oils. So you're getting complex carbohydrates, you're getting healthy plant protein, and you're getting healthy fat. So, you know, physiologically, you have no choice but to lose weight, and I would say 90% of the cases, cholesterol came down very dramatically, blood sugar, blood pressure, weight. You know, you're consuming foods that are just naturally low in calories and rich in nutrients, so it's hard not to have that occurrence.
I'm going to start to invite, we have a few more things that we'd like to say, but I want to start to invite members of the audience who've got questions there are people with microphones, and I've been instructed that I'm not allowed to call on anybody because we're recording this for future use. So if you are interested, please come to the microphones, and the microphones are going to be where?
The microphones will come to you.
The microphones will come to you. Okay.
I have one right here.
Okay.
For those of us that are on the diet that have very young children, what's the appropriate amount of fat to include in their diet, and where do you suggest we get that from?
Let's turn that
Well,
to Tom.
okay. You know what? I would tell you that there's three books out there. One is Baby and Child Care by Dr. Benjamin Spock, the second best-selling book on the planet next to the Bible, and he recommends that after the age of 2, children go on a plant-based diet. Dr. Joel Fuhrman has written a book called, I'm just going to say, Disease-Proof Your Child. Thank you very much. And then Dr. Charles Atwood wrote a book called The Low-Fat Prescription for Children. And basically, every one of them advocates that after the age of 2, you eat plant-based, and you're getting all the essential and non-essential fats you need. And as human beings, we really only need 3 to 5% of our fats, percent of our calories coming from fat. We as a culture get more like 30 to 40%.
I can't comment on the grams of fat needed for a child. I'm not a pediatrician, but I can make an observation and a statement. I think one of the most powerful ways for children to learn to eat a healthier diet is to see it modeled in mom and dad. And I think we neglect this at our peril. So if we're not cooking and eating healthy foods that are not processed, you know, just making your own food from scratch will pretty much guarantee it won't be, you know, full of salt. And depending on what you pick, probably lower in fat, and the fats will probably be more plant-based and healthy for you then. But my point is eating at home, teaching kids to cook with us. You know, in this course that I run with the culinary chefs of the Culinary Institute of America and the docs and nutritionists, one of the favorite workshops is where a guest chef named Joyce Goldstein, who's a very reputable and wonderful chef, brings in her grandson, who's now probably about 12. And he demonstrates the 3, 4, or 5 favorite dishes his grandma taught him in the kitchen. And he just brings down the whole house. Because when you have a 10 or 12-year-old who owns the kitchen, they're gonna eat healthy for the rest of their lives. So I think that's part of the solution here too. Not necessarily the micronutrients, but that's part of it too, but teaching people how to cook and enjoy, and then having us as adults model it day in and day out for everybody else. You've probably been a great role model to your peers, and I think that's probably a big part of the success.
And I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old as well.
In the front?
Yeah.
Oh, right there, go ahead.
Me?
Yes. You have the microphone. He who has the microphone gets to speak.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering about the use of olive oil, especially.
I'm going to apologize for this. We're a little blinded by the lights in our eyes, so it's a little. Okay.
The microphone comes to you.
Okay.
Each person will say, question here.
Okay. So, Bram, you are standing next to a lady with a microphone. Please speak.
I was just wondering about the use of olive oil, especially with greens, which I really love, but I often saute with some garlic and olive oil, and I use a lot of olive oil when I make my own salad dressings.
Yeah, I think, is this on? Okay.
I think.
I think that that's the best oil to use, as long as you're not heating it too high where it loses its properties. But, olive oil, think Mediterranean, and there is data to show that the Mediterranean diet is helpful for a lot of chronic disease. So now the key is a little amount. You don't want to be getting too much of anything, no matter what it is. So what I encourage people to do is just use a small amount, but really kick up the spices. So lots of, it doesn't have to be fresh, but you can use dried spices in cooking, something to bring flavor, maybe some lemon juice, as opposed to relying so much on the oil if you're trying to get more towards, engine 2 fully. Now, I also think that using olive oil does help. I mean, this is anecdotal for sure, but I think it does help some people control their hunger. So when you include a small amount of healthy fat, whether it's in olive oil or nuts, the classic example for me is if I don't put any sort of olive oil in my oatmeal in the morning, I'm hungry much sooner than if I put a little drop in. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's mind over matter, but I put a little bit in, and I'm not hungry until lunchtime. I also have lots of fruit in there too. I use cranberries or whatever. But so I think that is a great oil to include. My family's Armenian, so we had to use it.
I'll just also add a couple of thoughts. Olive oil, there's a lot of evidence epidemiologically from studies of different groups of populations in the Mediterranean that people who have a predominantly plant-based diet and use predominantly olive oil actually have the lowest cardiovascular risk, and a few studies to suggest that kind of a diet with olive oil and nuts and healthy fats can actually stabilize or reverse cardiovascular disease. With regard to the cook in me says olive oil is a great oil to cook with. Again, Tara made a good point. It doesn't tolerate high heat. So if you're going to do a Chinese stir fry, you can't use olive oil. This is where the cooking part in the kitchen is really important. If you're going to cook in high heat, you need a canola oil or a peanut oil or another vegetable-based oil. The other thing is most people think they need a lot of oil. You just need enough to coat a little bit of the pan, and you can always get away with a little more liquid, whether it's a chicken or a vegetable broth or a wine or a sake. You need less oil than you think to cook. And the other thing that most non-cooks don't know is there's something called finishing oils, which are really the more expensive oils, but these are really fine and delicious. And a teaspoon or a tablespoon of them can change a whole dish in terms of how it tastes. So these are all the cook's tricks, but I'm not one for drowning things in oil, but that again is making my point that if you don't know how to use them properly, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah, I'd love to get in my 2 cents too. And so that is, obviously these guys are okay with olive oil. I would tell you that most Americans they're dipping their bread in olive oil, they're putting it on their salads, they think that it is a health food. It's not a health food. It is the triumph of marketing over science in a big, big way. I don't care what oil it is, whether it's canola, safflower, sunflower, olive. They're the most concentrated source of calories on the planet, 120 calories per tablespoon. Most Americans probably having 3 tablespoons a day of some sort of oil. That's almost 380 empty calories. They have no vitamins, no minerals. Olive oil has trace amounts of vitamin E. Olive oil is 15% artery clogging saturated fat. So I would say that the Mediterranean actually is the island of Crete in the 1950s. It wasn't the olive oil that was protecting them. It was all the fruits, the vegetables, whole grains, as opposed to the olive oil. So I would just say that you can use water, beer, wine, veggie broth, orange juice, carrot juice, all these things. When you cook, when you bake, you don't have to use oils. You can use applesauce, you can use banana, pumpkin puree. So once you lose your craving, your palate for the oils, it tastes like synthetic goo. But it does take a little while.
Well, you can see we have a difference of opinion on let me take somebody who's back there.
We have a question back here.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you for coming out today. Really appreciate your talking with us. I read Dr. Campbell's book last year, and I went from vegetarian to vegan, or what I call pragmatic vegan. But I still obsess about the micronutrients. You know, I looked at what I was eating, and I said, you know what, I got to add some flaxseed. So I started sticking flaxseed in my coffee grinder, so I had ground flaxseed for my breakfast in the morning. What is the best thing I can do to make sure that I don't have to worry about this crap anymore, and I can just eat it?
The best thing you can do is not worry about worrying about it. I mean, that's actually a good point. I would like to talk less about the nutrient part of it, but also this whole, when people get so revved up about what they're putting in their mouth, it can turn into a negative. So that's one place that I think people really need to evaluate. I'm not disagreeing that Americans take a message, let's say the olive oil message, and then they run with it. I mean, that's where the education piece really needs to happen. But I also feel that there's this really ugly dynamic with food in this country and what it's doing for you. Like, people just do not enjoy food anymore. They've lost sense of what it actually does for us. So if you have that fire in your belly because you're like, well, I don't know if that water is where it's from. I mean, that I think is something that can be more disease promoting than almost anything, arguably. So I'm sorry, I will defer to Rip on the nutrient part. I know that, I mean, I just don't know if you want to.
What was it about the ground flaxseed meal that got you so worked up?
It didn't get me worked up. I said, okay, I'm not getting my omega N, whatever number it was, I don't remember now.
Well, yeah.
Flaxseed had it, so I added it.
Well, as far as the omega-3s, everybody seems to be getting gaga goo over getting their omega-3s from fish. And I just say, man, the mother source is green leafies are great, soybeans are great, walnuts are great, and then ground flaxseed meal are great. So are chia seeds, and they don't go rancid, so you don't have to grind them up.
Thank you very much for coming today and the fantastic movie. Please give 5 actions to promote your cause that I can put in our 2 monthly newsletters that go out to about 3,000. We're a nonprofit, optimumhealthsolution.org. Our mission is to eliminate obesity, chronic disease, and malnutrition, especially in children, through education of healthy living.
Let me see if I understand. 5 action steps to improve the American diet about obesity?
That we here today and all through New England, those that are promoting and want to take action. What can we do politically, socially, so forth in our community to promote what you're pushing in the movie?
Okay. Well, let me ask each of the panelists to come up with 2 that work for them. We'll get to more than 5.
I can mention 2 that are increasingly, 3 that are already in the public domain that we have not fully actualized. We got to get rid of all the trans fats, and we're making a lot of headway there, and get them completely gone, particularly from hospitals and schools and that sort of thing. The other obvious one is sugary beverages, which are also now, really only in the last 6 months, is the country and our parents saying, okay, we're getting rid of these things in terms of our schools.
How can the individual, what can the individual do?
I'm
That I
going to
don't
let
think.
the panelists answer. Thank
Anyway,
you.
let me give you the 3 that are most obvious to me. And the other is the Institute of Medicine just talked about the fact that Americans are eating twice as much salt as they should, or 3 times or 4 times. The diet that Rip has really talked about, and the diet that Tara and I would agree to, as well, which is predominantly plant-based and food made from scratch as opposed to processed food, processed baked goods, processed crackers. Eating real food, as Michael Pollan would call it, predominantly plants and not too much, is in and of itself a low-salt diet. And when you put a pinch or even 2 pinches of salt in a plant-based vegetable dish, you're still at maybe 100 or 150 milligrams of salt per serving, as opposed to 500, 600, 700, 1,000. So would you guys agree with that? So there's 3 that are obvious and in the public record now.
I would say get in the kitchen and cook, even if you don't know how. I mean, I tell people peanut butter and honey and banana sandwiches count. You know, I think once people figure out that they can do it, and it's quite simple, you don't have to be a cook or a chef. You know, these cooking shows have been, they've been great and bad at the same time, because I think they've encouraged people to think about food a little bit, but they've also made people scared to mess up or fail, you know. So I do think that we need to cook. And the other thing too, simple organization. You know, the night before you're gonna go to work the next day, get your lunch ready so that you're not buying it in the cafeteria. That right there can make a huge health impact. And it's maybe stuff that you have left over in the fridge, but that simple organization of putting lunch together and bringing it in, and that right there can make a huge impact on improving someone's health by limiting this, or not limiting, but really reducing the sodium drastically from eating out at a takeout place or a cafeteria style. I mean, how many people walked through the cafeteria here today? Nobody. Good. No, but it was.
Let's reward.
I got here a little early, and let's just say it was interesting paradox to walk through there and then watch this movie. I mean, it's just, we have a long way to go. But the other thing I would suggest too is wherever you are, you can get in touch with your local constituents and argue for healthier food, farmers markets, things like that. There's a lot of Slow Food Boston, the website. There's a lot of connections that can be made, that you can have a voice, or collectively get together and try to improve some of these things. So, but as an individual, simple organization, it sounds silly, but grocery shopping once a week, those types of things can make a huge difference. So
I would say knowledge is power. Read, get on the internet, do your own Google due diligence, but whether it's the China Study, Prevent and Reverse, Engine 2, the Kind Diet, the All-Pro Diet by Tony Gonzalez. There's a multitude of different books on why you want to eat plant-based. So read so that you're empowered with this information. And then it will be much easier, and you'll be much more inspired and motivated to make this change. Because we live in a society today that does not support this lifestyle. So you have to really, really understand why you're doing this. And so read. The next would be, eat more plants, eat more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans, and then move. We've become very sedentary. We need to move more.
One last question over here.
Just in response to the doctor's skepticism with the rates of cancer, and the diet. I was wondering if any studies have been done, and I'm not familiar with these myself, on a population that eats very small amount of vegetables, like an Eskimo Inuit population. Were the rates in that type of population much higher? Has it ever been compared with a population that does not eat a lot of vegetables to see how they compare?
Sorry?
is it for cancer in specific, or just?
No, I was just wondering in general, these studies that you talk about, it seems like we're compared with a lot of groups that, China, that eat a lot of vegetables. Have we compared with any groups that eat no vegetables or that live off of, whale blubber or whatever other dietary?
Do you know the answer to that, Tara?
I don't know of anything.
I think it's a fair question. I think, these associations.
Aren't those Americans?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's an excellent question, and this is what epidemiologists do for a living. That is, they look at whole populations and they say, what are the associations between the exposure of a given population either to food or movement or cold or environmental factors or smoking, and cancer risk or heart disease risk. We do know, for instance, that eating more red meat raises your risk of colon cancer for the average American. We do know that a higher percent body fat among women raises the relative risk of developing breast cancer. Now, that's not saying eating more protein causes breast cancer. These kinds of associations, number one, are rare because they're hard to find, because you have to rule out all the other things that could be going on. And secondly, and this is an important point, it's almost impossible, and certainly on some level potentially immoral, to imagine a study where you're going to randomize people and say, you eat this way and you eat that way. So these all become retrospective looks in the rear view mirror that give us a hint. And I just want to make that point. It's going to be very hard to do this prospectively. But my aspiration is that if more and more Americans turn back the clock from where we are now to eat more plants and less animal-based meat and fat, we may see a reversal in these trends again 20 years hence from the rearview mirror. I hope so. But it's a fair question, and I just want to make the point, nobody, not the NIH, not the US government, not the world, is going to spend $100 million to do a prospective study that says this group of K through 12 kids are going to eat this way, and this group is going to eat this way. It can't happen, and it would be wrong. So it's complicated, is my point. We're doing the best we can.
I just want to mention there's a great book called The Jungle Effect. Has anybody read that, by Daphne Miller? I really liked that book. She's a primary care physician in San Francisco who was noticing that a lot of her patients from other cultures that were coming in, they were healthy when they started out here, and then they started developing diseases, diabetes, heart disease, obesity. So what she really did is she looked into the culture of where these people were coming from, and instead of handing out prescriptions, was really having them work on recipes of their families and then having them eat those foods. And it's pretty powerful. It's a great book, and there's recipes included too. So I think that might be something worth looking at. It's called The Jungle Effect. So.
And if you look at the latest data that's come out as far as how Americans eat, almost 62% of America's calories are coming from refined and processed foods. This is the white flour, the white sugar, the white pasta, the white rice, the cookies, the soda pops. The number one source of calories from children right now is coming from soda pop. And then about 30% is coming from animal-based products, and that's all dairy products. And then it's meat products. And then only 12% is coming from plant-based products, and half that 12% is coming from French fries. So it's 6% of America's calories are coming from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans. 6%. So, and everything that's out there shows, you look at the top 10 foods to fight cancer, whatever. It's broccoli, it's Swiss chard, it's kale, it's fruits. So again, I'm going to say we're plant weak right now. We got to swing that pendulum around and become plant strong. So that if you decide that you have to eat your meat or your dairy, it's a minimal amount. Same thing with the processed foods.
We need to start to close here. I do believe that some of the panelists are going to be around for a few minutes if you want to speak with them. And I really thank you all for being so energized in your response. It really is such an interesting movie, and it does exactly what we hoped, which is to get people to come together and talk about food. And so I want to thank the Museum of Science for their support of this initiative, to each member of our panel, to Whole Foods and Slow Foods, who rallied many of you here, to Rip and his forebears, who were all featured in the movie. And I really like the shark very much. And when the movie comes out, please go see it. And you're going to stick around and sign books, aren't you?
I'd love to stick around and sign books. I also like a little call to action, anybody that's interested, that all the whole food markets throughout the Boston area are going to be holding Engine 2 28-day challenges. So if you're looking for a support group and you're interested in taking your health to the next level, then ask your local Whole Foods when they're going to be holding the next Engine 2 28-day challenge so you can have that great support group. It's free, and they have weekly support meetups, cooking classes, supper clubs.
Where do I sign up?
Mary, do you have a sign-up sheet here?
I didn't know that. That's a great thing.
Yeah.
If you wanted to try it out
And,
for a month, it's a
Yeah,
way.
there's over
Yeah.
100 Whole Food stores right now throughout the country that are holding 28-day challenges. So it's really amazing how Whole Foods is trying to be a real motivator for change for people.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. And
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Rip will be signing books, and you will have an opportunity to purchase books in just a minute. Dr. Eisenberg and Tara and Louisa are here. Some representatives from Whole Foods are here if you want to find out more information about the 28-day challenge. And we hope you will continue to join us for our Let's Talk About Food programs. Thank you.